I never thought I would spend the night of my 66th birthday sitting on a cold concrete floor, wrapped in my late husband's old work jacket, listening to rain hammer a tin roof I did not even know we owned. But there I was, a single flashlight in my hand, a padlock key still warm from being clenched in my fist for the last 3 hours, and somewhere behind me in the dark the smell of engine oil, and dust and something I could not yet name. My son's voice would not leave my head. It kept circling back, sharp and casual at the same time, the way only cruelty from your own child can be. You've got nothing to offer anyone anymore, Mum. Dad understood that. That's why he left you a shed. What are you going to do with a shed? My hands were shaking so badly I could barely fit the key into the rusted lock. It took me 4 tries. When the mechanism finally gave, the door swung inward with a long groan, like the building itself was reluctant to let me in. I lifted the flashlight, and what the beam landed on stopped the breath in my chest. This was not a shed. This was not the pile of broken junk my son had laughed about. What I was looking at, in the dark, on the worst night of my life, was something that would flip my entire world upside down. But I am getting ahead of myself. To understand why I was standing in a locked garage at 11 o'clock at night, with nowhere else in the world to go, you have to understand how the day started. It started in a lawyer's office, in a black dress I had already worn once that month. Thomas and I were married for 39 years. He passed on a Tuesday morning in early autumn, quietly, in a hospital bed, with my hand in both of his. His lungs had been failing for a long time. Pulmonary fibrosis, the doctors called it. A slow tightening that stole his breath a little more each season. He never complained. Not once. He would just smile at me across the kitchen table and say, "We've had a good run, Ruthie. We've had a real good run." 3 weeks after the funeral, I sat in the office of a man named Gerald Ellison, our family attorney for the better part of 2 decades, and beside me sat my son Grant, 41 years old, in a suit that probably cost more than my first car, checking his phone under the table, like the reading of his father's will, was an appointment he was squeezing in between meetings. Mr. Ellison would not look at me, I remember that. He shuffled the pages, cleared his throat twice, and adjusted his glasses like they were the problem. Before I begin, he said, "I want you both to understand that Thomas was of entirely sound mind, and that every provision here is exactly as he instructed, legally airtight, every word." I did not understand then that this was a warning. I do now. The reading went the way these things go, a blur of formal language and dollar amounts and property descriptions, until certain sentences cut through the fog and lodged in me like splinters. To my son Grant Hale, I leave the family residence on Windermere Drive, the whole of my brokerage accounts, and the balance of my liquid assets. And then near the very bottom, almost like an afterthought, like something my husband had scribbled in a hurry, this. To my wife Ruth Hale, I leave the property, located at 8 Delford Lane, the garage and its contents therein. A garage. 39 years and my husband left me a garage. I felt Grant shift beside me before I even turned to look. His face had changed. The grief he had been wearing, like a costume, slid right off, and underneath was something I did not want to see on my own child. Satisfaction. He put his hand on my shoulder and squeezed a little too hard, and he leaned in and murmured, "Don't you worry, Mum. I'll take care of you." Like a promise. Like a threat. I could not tell the difference anymore. I did not cry in that office. I was too stunned to cry. All I could think, over and over, was why. Why would Thomas do this to me? Where was I supposed to sleep? What had I done in 39 years to earn a garage? The answer came fast, and it came from my own son. Grant drove me back to the house that evening. The house on Windermere Drive. The one Thomas and I had lived in for the last 11 years. The one with the garden I planted myself and the reading chair by the window, where my husband used to fall asleep with a book on his chest. Grant carried my small overnight bag in from the car and set it down in the front hall, and then he did not take his coat off. That was the first thing I noticed. He did not take his coat off. "I think it's best if you stayed somewhere else tonight, Mum." I laughed because I thought he was joking. "What do you mean, somewhere else?" "This is my home." "It's my home now," he said, and there was no joke in it. "It's in the will." Dad was clear. "I've got some people coming by tomorrow to look at the place, and I need to start moving things around. I really don't have the space for a house guest right now." A house guest. He called me a house guest. I stood in the hallway I'd walked 10,000 times, and I felt the floor tilt under me. "Grant," I said, "where would I even go? It's dark. It's raining." He shrugged, and I will never, as long as I live, forget how easy that shrug was. Like flicking away a fly, "Go stay with your sister." "Or," he said, and here his mouth curled into something ugly, "there's always that garage Dad left you. You could set up a cot in it." He actually laughed. "Honestly, I don't know why he bothered giving you that dump. What are you going to do? Open a body shop at your age?" I reached for the back of a chair to keep myself upright. "Grant, please. Just let me stay tonight. Just tonight. I'll figure everything out in the morning." And that is when my son said the thing that I carried with me out into the rain. The thing that echoed in that garage 3 hours later. The thing I will hear on my deathbed. "You've got nothing to offer anyone anymore, Mum." Dad understood that. That's why he left you a shed. I did not argue. I did not beg. Something in me went very still and very quiet. I picked up my overnight bag, took my purse, took the small brass key that Mr. Ellison had handed me at the end of the reading, and I walked out of the house that I had made a home. I got into my old Toyota, and I drove. I drove with no destination for a long time, the wipers slapping back and forth, the city lights smearing across the windshield. My sister lived 2 states away, and we had not spoken in a year. My friends were kind, but they had their own lives, their own small houses, their own grief. I could not knock on a door at 10 at night and say, "My son threw me out. Can I sleep on your couch?" The shame of it sat in my throat like a stone. So I did the only thing left. I typed the address from the will into my phone, 8 Delford Lane, and I followed the little blue line into a part of the city I had never once had a reason to visit, past shuttered warehouses and chain-link fences and streetlights with the bulbs burned out, until the phone told me I had arrived. It did not look like much. A long, low building of grey block, 1 wide roll-up door, and 1 regular door beside it. A faded number 8 stencilled crooked on the wall. There was a heavy padlock on the small door. Rust bled down the metal in orange streaks. It looked, honestly, exactly like the dump my son had described. For a moment I just sat in the car and let myself cry, because it seemed like the perfect ending to the worst day of my life. To be cast out of my home and handed a rotting garage in a neighbourhood where nobody would hear me scream. But it was mine. It was the only thing in the entire world that was mine. So I got out into the rain, and I walked up, and I fit the brass key into that rusted lock, and after 4 tries it opened. And now we are back where we started, with me standing in the doorway, flashlight trembling in my hand, looking at the thing that stopped my heart. There were cars inside, not junk, not a lawnmower and a stack of old paint cans. Cars. 3 of them that I could see, and the shape of a 4th further back, each one draped in a fitted cloth cover. Pale grey, tucked and smooth like someone had put them to bed with real tenderness. And peeking out from beneath the nearest cover, catching my flashlight and throwing it back at me, was a curve of chrome and a slice of deep green paint so glossy it looked wet. I did not understand. In 39 years, Thomas had never once mentioned cars. He drove a sensible sedan. He complained when I wanted to spend $40 on a nice dinner. This man, my careful, frugal husband, had a secret garage full of covered automobiles in a warehouse district across town, and I'd never had the faintest idea. I stepped inside. My footsteps echoed, and with fingers that would not stop shaking, I reached out and pulled the cover off the nearest car. It slid away like water, and underneath it was a Jaguar. A 1961 E-Type Roadster, British racing green. The long, low hood stretching out impossibly far, the whole thing looking less like a machine and more like something poured out of a mould and polished by hand for 100 years. I knew almost nothing about cars, but even I knew this was not an ordinary thing sitting in an ordinary garage. It gleamed like it had rolled off a showroom floor that afternoon. "Thomas," I whispered into the dark, "what did you do?" I moved to the next cover and pulled. A Shelby, low and mean, dark blue with 2 white stripes running nose to tail. Its engine so big it looked like it might not fit under the hood. The third was smaller, rounder, silver, a little Porsche with soft curves that looked almost shy sitting next to the muscle beside it. And the 4th, the one in the back, was long and strange, with a wing on the back like something out of a comic book, orange as a sunrise. Beside each car stood a small brass plaque on a stand, and a leather portfolio thick with papers. I did not have to read them to understand that these were not hobbies. These were treasures. And my husband, the man who reused tea bags, had been hiding them from me for who knows how long. That is when I saw the envelope. Taped to the wall beside a light switch, my name written across the front in Thomas's handwriting. The loops and slants I would know anywhere. My legs nearly gave out. I flipped the switch first, and the whole building came alive. Not the dim yellow bulb I expected, but banks of clean white light dropping down from a finished ceiling, revealing a space that was nothing like the ruin outside. The floor was smooth and sealed. There were vents humming softly, climate control, keeping the air dry and even. There were cameras in the corners, racks of tools that had never been used. This was not a forgotten shed. This was a vault, dressed up on the outside to look like a place no thief would ever bother with. I sank down onto a leather bench against the wall, peeled the envelope off, and opened it. My dearest Ruth, if you are reading this, then I am gone, and you have found what I have been building for you. First, I need you to know I'm sorry. I'm sorry for the shock and the fear, and whatever cruelty you had to walk through to get here, because I have a terrible feeling I know how our son will behave the moment I am no longer in the room. I had to stop reading. A sound came out of me that I did not recognize. 6 years ago, the letter went on. When the doctors first told me my lungs were failing, they gave me a number of years, and I decided in that hospital parking lot that I would not spend those years the way most men spend them. I would spend them making sure that when I was gone, you would never again have to depend on anyone's goodwill to have a roof over your head, especially not his. I know you are wondering about the will. I know it looks like a betrayal, leaving the house and the money to Grant, and leaving you what looks like a broken-down garage. But Ruthie, I have watched our son for 10 years turn into a man I do not fully recognize. I have heard how he talks to you when he thinks I am not listening. I have seen him roll his eyes at you, talk over you, treat your feelings like an inconvenience to be managed. If I had left everything to you, both together, he would have found a way to control it. He would have handled it for your own good, and within a year, you would have been asking your own son for permission to buy groceries. The tears were coming freely now, dropping onto the page and blurring the ink, and I pressed my sleeve to my eyes so I could keep reading. So I built you something he would never think to want. The cars in front of you are worth, together, a little under $9 million. Their papers are in the portfolios. A man named Raymond Voss has managed this collection with me for years, and his number is on the back of this letter. He is honest and he was my friend, and he will help you with whatever you decide to do with them. $9 million. I looked up at those 4 covered shapes, 3 of them uncovered now and gleaming under the lights, and the number simply would not fit in my head. It was a joke. It had to be a joke. But the cars are not even the real gift, the letter said. Behind the framed photograph of the 2 of us at the lake, there is a wall safe. The combination is the day we met, month, day, year. Inside you will find the deed to a house, and the papers for a trust that is now yours, and enough to keep you comfortable and free for the rest of your days. I did not want to give you numbers on a page, Ruthie. I wanted to give you something you could touch, something beautiful, something no one could take. I stood up so fast the bench scraped the floor. There, on the wall, was a photograph I had forgotten existed. The 2 of us at the little lake up north, 30 years younger, sunburned and laughing, Thomas's arm slung around my shoulders. I crossed the garage and lifted it off its hook, and behind it was a small steel door with a dial. The day we met. I spun the numbers with a hand that would barely obey me. 6, 19, the year. The little door clicked and swung open. Inside was a thick folder and a row of small labelled drives. Everything neat, everything ordered. So completely Thomas that I laughed and sobbed at the same time. I pulled out the folder and opened it, and the first page was titled, in plain type, The Estate of Thomas Hale, provided for Ruth Hale. Below it, columns. A lake house in Maine, a place called Camden. Purchased 4 years ago, fully furnished. 2 rental properties generating monthly income. A conservative portfolio built to pay me for the rest of my life, without my ever having to touch the principal. And at the bottom of the page, a total that made my ears ring and the room go soft at the edges. I had to sit back down on the floor, right there on the smooth concrete, the folder open in my lap. There was more of the letter. I made myself read it. You are going to wonder why I did not just protect you the simple way, split it evenly, trusted our son to do right by you. And the honest answer, Ruthie, is that I wanted to know. I have always believed a person shows you exactly who they are the moment an inheritance is on the table, both by what they take and by what they think they deserve. So I gave Grant the shiny things and I gave you the real ones, and I told no one, and I let the chips fall. If he rises to the occasion, if he takes care of you the way a son should, then perhaps you will choose to share some of this with him one day, and I will have been wrong, and I will be glad to have been wrong. But if he shows you what I am afraid he will show you, then this is your armour, your independence, your proof that you are never useless, never a burden, never anything less than the best thing that ever happened to me. All my love, now and always. Tom. I sat on that floor for a long time, long enough that the rain stopped, long enough that I stopped shaking. And somewhere in that long silence, surrounded by $9 million of automobiles and a folder full of everything my husband had quietly built to keep me safe, a strange thing happened. The fear drained out of me, and something else moved in to take its place. Not joy. Not yet. Something colder and steadier than joy. A kind of clarity. Grant had thrown me out of my own home hours earlier and called me useless, and he had done it while believing he had won. I spent that first night on a small leather sofa in an office at the back of the garage, an office I had not even noticed at first, complete with a tiny bathroom, a shower, a refrigerator with water and food in it, and a closet with a few changes of clothes hanging inside, tags still attached. All of them my size. My husband had thought of everything. He had even thought that I might need a place to sleep on the very first night, before I found my footing. I fell asleep in that office with his letter pressed against my chest, and for the first time in 3 weeks, I slept without waking. In the morning I called Raymond Voss. He answered on the second ring, an older man's voice, warm and unhurried. "Mrs. Hale," he said before I'd finished saying my own name. "I've been hoping you would call." And then gently, "I am so sorry about Thomas. He was a good man, and a better friend. And I've been sitting by this phone for 3 weeks, not knowing if you knew yet. I only found the garage last night," I told him, and my voice cracked on the last word. He came within the hour, a tall, careful man in his late 60s, grey at the temples, a soft handshake and steady eyes. We sat in the little office, and he poured coffee from a thermos he had brought, and slowly, patiently, he walked me through what my husband had done. "Thomas started collecting 6 years ago," Raymond said. "The same season he got his diagnosis, though I did not know that at the time. He was the most disciplined buyer I ever worked with. Every car researched to the bone. Every purchase a real investment, not a whim. He used to say to me, 'Ray, I am not buying cars. I am buying my wife a future she can see and touch.' I asked him the question that had been eating at me all night. 'Why cars, Raymond?' He never cared about cars, not in 39 years. Raymond smiled at that, a small sad smile. 'He told me why once,' he said. 'He told me that money in an account is a number, and a number can be moved, and hidden, and taken. And a person can be talked out of a number by someone they trust. But a beautiful machine sitting in front of you is a fact. You can put your hand on it. You can sell it, or keep it, or drive it up the coast. He wanted to leave you something no one could argue you out of. That was the whole point. He wanted you to be untalk out of able.' I put my face in my hands, and I wept. And Raymond Voss, a man I had known for 40 minutes, sat quietly and let me. Before he left, he told me the collection was safe, the storage and maintenance paid up for the next 5 years, that there was no rush to decide anything, and that I could sell them together, or one at a time, or never at all. 'Whatever you want, Mrs. Hale,' he said. 'For the first time in a long time, the whole thing is yours to decide.' That afternoon I sat with the folder and understood slowly how completely my husband had freed me. Beyond the cars, there were the rental properties, the trust, the portfolio. And there was the deed to the house in Maine, a place called Camden, a town Thomas and I had visited 3 times over the years, and loved every time, standing on the harbour, eating lobster rolls and talking about how we would retire there someday. He had bought us that someday. He had bought it 4 years ago and never said a word. I had a home, a real home, not a garage, however full of treasure. A house by the sea, with my name on the door. That evening my phone rang. Grant. I looked at his name on the screen for a long moment before I answered. "Mom, where are you?" he said. "No hello. Aunt Carol says you never showed up. Your friend Denise hasn't heard from you either." What is going on? I'm fine, Grant, I said. My voice came out even, and it surprised me. I found somewhere to stay. Somewhere to stay where? You can't just vanish. That's not normal, Mum. He was working himself up, and I realised with a strange detachment that he was not worried about me. He was worried about what people would think, about the optics of a mother who had disappeared. Look, he said, I need you to come get the rest of your stuff out of the house. I've got the decorator starting Monday. Everything needs to be cleared out by then. There was no apology. No, are you warm? Are you eating? Do you have a bed? Just a deadline. I understand, I said. I thought about the folder in my lap, the deed, the letter, everything my husband had known, and everything my son had just confirmed. And I made a decision that felt less like anger and more like stepping off a ledge into calm water. What time on Monday would work for you? I asked. Before 9, he said. I've got meetings. I'll be there, I said. And I hung up and I called Raymond back and asked him if he knew a good estate attorney. By the time I went to sleep that second night, I had an appointment. On Monday morning, I arrived at the house on Windermere Drive at 8:45, dressed in one of the outfits from the garage closet, a soft grey blouse that fit like it had been made for me, my hair done for the first time in a month. Grunt opened the door with his phone against his ear and barely glanced at me. The house already felt wrong. Emptier. Colder. The family photographs that had lined the hallway for 11 years were gone, pale rectangles left on the paint where they had hung. He had taken down the pictures of his own father, of me, of us. Finally, he said, ending his call, I boxed most of your stuff already. The decorator's coming at 10, so let's make this quick. Good morning to you too, Grant, I said. He led me to the bedroom, where cardboard boxes sat stacked on what had been my side of the bed, and then he waved a hand toward another pile in the corner and said the thing that broke something in me that had not broken the night he threw me out. That's Dad's stuff, he said. I kept his watch. Rest is just old clothes and junk. Take what you want, the rest goes to donation. Junk. He called his father's things junk. I knelt down and opened the first box, and there was Thomas, his reading glasses, the paperback he had never finished, a bookmark still holding his place at a page he would never turn, the wool sweater I'd given him our last Christmas, still faintly carrying the smell of him. My son stood behind me checking his watch, while I lifted my husband out of a cardboard box marked donation. I took my time. Grant hated that. He paced and sighed and told me twice that I was being slow, that it was just stuff, that I did not even have anywhere to put it all. I have a place, I told him quietly, without looking up, and I will take exactly as long as I need. He rolled his eyes and left the room. And as I sat there sorting my life into keep and leave, I moved through a grief that had nothing to do with Thomas. I grieved my son, the boy I had raised. Somewhere in the years between then and now, that boy had become a man who could stand over his mother and call his father junk, and feel nothing at all. Thomas had seen it clearly enough to spend his last years and his last strength building me a shield against my own child. I'd spent those same years making excuses. He's just busy. He's just stressed. He doesn't mean it. He meant it. He had always meant it. When I finished, I found Grant in what had been Thomas's study, my husband's mahogany desk already gone, replaced by some cold slab of glass and steel. I'm done, I said. He nodded without looking up. I asked if I could have a few minutes alone in the house to say goodbye. 11 years of memories, and he waved his hand and said, Fine, whatever. Lock up when you leave. And brushed past me and was gone. I walked through every room. I said goodbye to all of it. And at the very back of the bedroom closet, shoved into a corner behind the last of Thomas's shirts, I found his old leather satchel, the one he carried for decades. I unzipped it. Inside was a sealed envelope with my name on it, and a note. If you find this, Ruthie, it's a spare copy of everything in the garage safe, just in case. My careful, thorough husband, backing up his backups even from beyond the grave. I tucked it into my purse and walked out of that house for the last time, and did not look back. I drove straight to the office of the attorney Raymond had recommended, a sharp, kind woman named Claire Dunmore, who read through my folder with her eyebrows climbing higher and higher. Mrs. Hale, she said finally, setting down the papers, your husband did not just plan an estate. He built you a fortress. This is some of the cleanest work I've ever seen. Everything is in your name. Everything is protected. And there is nothing, legally, that anyone can do to unwind it. She looked at me over her glasses. And by anyone, I assume we are talking about your son. We were. We talked for 2 hours, and I left with a plan and a strange lightness in my chest. I made the long drive up to Camden 2 days later, and when I turned down a quiet lane lined with pines and pulled up in front of a grey shingled house with a blue door and a glimpse of the harbour between the trees, I sat in my car and could not move. It was perfect. It was small and warm and precisely my taste, as if Thomas had reached into my head and pulled out the house I had always wanted without my ever describing it. I let myself in with the key from the folder. There were bookshelves flanking a stone fireplace, a window seat cushioned in the exact shade of blue I would have chosen, and above a little writing desk in the corner hung a watercolour of a harbour I recognised, painted by a street artist we had met on our very first trip to this town, a painting I thought had been lost in a move years ago. He had tracked it down, or had it copied from memory. Either way, he had hung it there for me to find. That was when I stopped grieving the will and started understanding it. Thomas had not disinherited me. He had done the opposite. He had spent his dying years loving me so carefully, so completely, and so quietly that I would not even know the full shape of it until he was gone and I needed it most. A neighbour knocked that first evening, an older woman named Pearl from 2 houses down, holding a covered dish. "Thomas asked me to look out for you," she said, when I opened the door with tears still on my face. "He came up here a few times over the years, fixing the place up just so. He told me his wife would come one day, and that when she did, she might need a friend." I stood in the doorway of the home my husband built for me, holding a stranger's casserole, and I understood that he had even arranged for me to not be lonely. I settled into that house. Mornings walking the harbour, afternoons with Claire and Raymond, sorting out the pieces of my new life. Evenings in the window seat watching the light change over the water. And for a few weeks there was peace. Then Grant found me. It started with phone calls, more frequent now, sharper. He had been going through his father's papers, he said. He had found references to accounts he did not recognise, meetings with advisors he had never heard of, notes about securing assets. "Do you know anything about this, Mum?" he asked, and I could hear the greed sitting right underneath the words. I told him his father had handled our finances, and that if there were other assets, surely Mr. Ellison would have mentioned them. It was not quite a lie. Mr. Ellison had mentioned exactly what Thomas told him to mention, and not one word more, but Grant was tenacious. It was the one thing about him that had never changed. He hired an investigator. He pulled property records. And one grey afternoon, as I was pruning a rosebush by the harbourside gate, a black SUV I did not recognise came down my quiet lane, and my son got out and stood there looking at my house with an expression I will never forget. Not relief that his missing mother was safe. Calculation. He was appraising it. "Found you," he said. "Nice place. When were you going to tell me about it, Mum?" I set down my shears. "Hello, Grant. Cut the act." He walked past me into the house without being invited, his eyes moving over everything, adding it up. Coastal Maine, waterfront. "This isn't a rental. Property records say Dad bought this 4 years ago and kept it off every account I could find. So either you knew about all of this the whole time, or," and he turned to face me, "or there's a lot more, isn't there?" I offered him tea. He refused it. He wanted numbers. He told me he had driven past the garage on Delford Lane before he came, that he had looked through the dirty windows, that he had seen the shapes of cars under covers, and made some calls to people he knew in the collector world. "Those aren't junkers, Mum," he said, his voice tight. "I know what a car under a fitted cover in a climate-controlled building means. That garage is worth more than the whole house Dad left me, and the penthouse is bleeding me dry with repairs. So I'm going to ask you one time, what exactly did my father leave you?" I looked at my son, this man I had carried and raised and defended for 41 years, standing in the home my husband built me, demanding an accounting of my inheritance 3 months after burying his father. And I made my choice. "Your father left me a letter," I said. "Would you like to read it?" He read it standing up in the middle of my living room, and I watched his face travel from hunger to disbelief to something dark and furious as he reached the parts where Thomas wrote about him, about the son who had hardened, about the fear of what he would do to me. When he finished, he set the pages down very carefully, The way you set something down when you are trying not to throw it. So Dad thought I was a monster, he said. His voice was low and shaking. He set this whole thing up as a test. He made you think you got nothing so he could watch how I'd treat you, and I failed, is that it? He tested me like a lab rat. He was worried about you, I said. He hoped he was wrong. Well, he wasn't wrong, was he? Grant snapped, and then caught himself, and I watched him realise what he had just admitted. He changed tactics the way he changed tactics in every negotiation of his life. Look, he said. Softer now. Reasonable now. This is clearly an unfair situation. Dad was sick. He wasn't thinking straight. Any court would look at hidden assets, secret trusts, a will designed to cut out his own son, and they would see a man who wasn't competent. Half of this should be mine. We can do this the easy way, Mum, or the hard way. I let him finish, and then I said very calmly, there is no hard way, Grant. I have already spoken to 3 attorneys. Your father's arrangements are airtight. There is nothing to contest. He worked with the best people in the state for 6 years to make sure a moment exactly like this one would go exactly the way it is going now. He stared at me like he had never seen me before, and in a way he hadn't. The mother he knew smoothed things over. The mother he knew accommodated. The mother he knew apologised for taking up space. That woman had died somewhere on a garage floor at 11 o'clock at night, and this new one was not going to give him a single inch. He left angry. He threatened lawyers. But the lawyers came back to him the same way they came back to me, and within a month, the threats went quiet. They went quiet because Grant had bigger problems. I learned the details slowly, some from Claire, some from Raymond, some from a phone call I almost did not take. The penthouse renovations he had started so eagerly had gone catastrophically over budget. The old building hiding rot and failing systems that ate money by the hundreds of thousands. And at the same time, a development deal he had poured everything into, borrowed against everything for, had collapsed when the site turned out to be contaminated. Investors pulled out. The bank called the loans. My son, who had inherited a multi-million-dollar home and a portfolio most people would never dream of, had leveraged all of it against a single roll of the dice, and the dice had come up wrong. He sent an assistant to see me first, a polished woman named Diane who sat on the edge of my sofa and explained with careful professional distance that Mr. Hale was facing foreclosure, that he needed help, that he was aware I had resources, that time was short. She did not use the word beg. She did not have to. Then Grant came himself. He looked terrible, thinner, rumpled in a way I had never seen him. The sharp, confident edges of him had gone soft and grey. He sat at my kitchen table, the harbour light coming through the window behind him, and for a moment I saw the little boy he used to be, the one who cried when his goldfish died, the one who used to fall asleep against my shoulder in the car. For a moment, Mom, he said, I need help. I know things have been bad between us, but I'm your son. I'm about to lose everything. I have nowhere else to go. And I want you to understand something. I felt it. I felt the pull of it. The oldest pull there is. The one that had made me carry his bag and excuse his cruelty and apologise for my own existence for 41 years. Every mother is built to answer that call. I sat there and I felt my hands want to reach across the table. But I thought about a garage floor at 11 o'clock at night. I thought about being 66 years old and homeless in the rain because my son could not spare one night's roof. I thought about a cardboard box marked donation with my husband inside it, and I thought about the letter and the man who spent his last breath making sure I would never again have to buy my safety by giving away my dignity. Grant, I said, I need you to hear all of this because I'm only going to say it once. He waited. 3 months ago you stood in a hallway and told me I had nothing left to offer anyone. You threw me into the rain and told me to go sleep in a shed. You called your father's belongings junk in front of my face. You took down our photographs. You sent an investigator after your own mother and called it a welfare check. And you sat in this house, the house your father died building for me, and you told me you would take half of everything the hard way if I did not just hand it over. He tried to speak and I lifted my hand and God help me, he stopped. Not because he was afraid of me, because for the first time in his life there was nothing in it for him to keep talking. I am not going to save you, I said. Not the way you want. I'm not going to write a check that lets you go back to being exactly the man who did those things, with none of it ever costing you anything. Your father gave you a fortune and a chance, and you burned through both, and that is not a tragedy that requires my rescue. That is a bill coming due. His face went hard. So that's it, he said. You're going to sit up here in the house Dad bought you, on Dad's money, and let your own son go bankrupt. To prove a point. I'm not proving anything, I said. I'm done proving things to you. That was the whole problem, Grant. For 41 years, I thought if I gave enough, gave everything, made myself small enough, and useful enough, and quiet enough, you would finally decide I had value. And your father watched me do it, and it broke his heart. And so before he died, he made sure I would never have to earn my place with you again. That's what this house is. That's what those cars are. They are your father telling me from the grave that I was always enough, and I am not going to spend them buying back a son who only remembered he had a mother the day he needed her money. He sat there for a long time, and then something in him curdled, the way it always did, the softness gone as fast as it had come. Fine, he said, standing, his chair scraping the floor the way it had scraped in that lawyer's office a lifetime ago. Fine. Enjoy your cars, Mum. Enjoy your little house. I hope Dad's ghost keeps you warm. He walked to my blue door, and at the threshold he turned, wanting the last word, the way he always did. I hope you're happy, he said. I am, I told him. And it was the truest thing I had said in a year. He left, and I did not chase him, and I did not call after him, and I did not lie awake that night rewriting the scene into one where I gave in, and everything went back to the comfortable, familiar ache of being his doormat. He filed for bankruptcy the following spring. The penthouse went to the bank. I heard months later that he had moved into a rented apartment 2 hours from anyone he knew, and that he told people his mother had abandoned him. Let him tell it that way. I have stopped needing my own son to describe me accurately. I am still in the house in Camden. Pearl and I have tea most afternoons. I kept the little silver Porsche because Raymond taught me to drive it. And on clear mornings, I take it up the coast with the top down and the salt air whipping my hair into a mess. And I talked to Thomas the whole way. The other 3 cars I sold, and the money went into a foundation for older women starting their lives over. Women who got thrown out into the rain and told they had nothing left to offer. There are more of us than you would think. I fund a small fleet of them into their own apartments every year. Thomas would have liked that. It is beautiful, and you can touch it, and no one can talk them out of it. People ask me sometimes if I regret how it ended with my son, if I wish I had helped him, if a mother should ever close the door, and I tell them the truth. I did not close the door. He did on a rainy night when he decided that a woman who had loved him his whole life was worth less to him than a spare bedroom. I just finally stopped holding it open for him. There is a difference. It took me 66 years and a locked garage in the dark to learn it. But there is a world of difference between a mother who abandons her child and a woman who at long last refuses to abandon herself. The key that opened that rusted padlock did not just open a garage, it opened the only door that ever really mattered. And I walked through it, and I did not look back, and I am never, ever going back into the rain again.